Abel. I'm going to share my screen in just a moment to do a PowerPoint. Um, I'm going to start off with quoting Monty Python, um, and now for something completely different. This is this is going to be a little different than what you just got. I'm going to be teaching, haranguing, um, trying to motivate you to see the world, all to see the world a little differently around character education. And so let me share my screen and put this onto a slideshow for you. Uh, and hopefully you can now see this. Uh, so what I want to do in 15 short minutes is to talk about the why and the what of character education. And you've heard some of it already from some of the speakers. I'm going to use this notion of prime, which is a model that I have been using. I have a book coming out on it soon, as my way to deal with this. But I do want to say right at the outset that the fact that you're using character.org's 11 principles is a great move. It has guided so many schools to excellence. It is a wonderful framework. It's working already, apparently, at the SST schools, from what I've been hearing. I'm going to give you a slightly different version or framework that I use. They're both good. And you can use both of them or one or the other. So I'm not doing this to say don't use the 11 principles. By all means, you should use the 11 principles. Keep using it. So I want to start with the why. Okay. I'm going to give you multiple reasons. And in doing this, part of my goal is to get you to see that this is not an SST issue, and this is not a Texas issue, and this is not a COVID issue, and this is not a now issue. This is an eternal global issue. And to do that, I'm going to flash back and forth through history and flash all around the globe in some ways to do that. But I want to start off with this notion that there is no off switch to character education. I don't have the quote up here, but Aristotle said over 2,000 years ago that every adult who's around kids, adolescents, children, whatever, affects their character, whether you like it intended or not. And so we talk about promoting character. I want to add an adjective onto that one, which is want to promote good character. Everybody has character. Some of it's good, some of it's bad. And we want to promote the nurturing and the flourishing of human goodness. Arthur said it nicely when he said that character is goodness. In the book that I've got coming out on Primed, the definition I use is nurturing the flourishing of human goodness. You will, every one of you educators and every parent and everybody else out there who's around kids will and do impact the character of kids. The question is whether you're doing it intentionally, effectively, and in a positive way. That's a very different thing than just saying, let's affect character. Second one comes from my tradition. I'm Jewish, and it's Tikkun Olam. And the notion of Tikkun Olam, this goes back to an ancient, thousands and thousands of years ago origin story. But the point of it is to say that every human being is born with a divine command or obligation to heal the world, to make it a better place than it was when you entered it, to be value added. Character education is a way to do that. Heraclitus, another classic Greek, said, character is destiny. The character of the people is the destiny of the world. And therefore, when you think about it this way, as much as educators are in the business of educating academically, and as much as we're arguing that they're also in the business of shaping individual character, or as my friend Avis Glaze from Canada says, we are in the people changing business. I think it's bigger than that. We are in the world changing business. This shapes our future. And I'm not going to get into politics and so on, but as you look around the world now, and not just the US, democracies in particular are struggling, but all societies are struggling. Most are struggling. And if we want a better world, we need to build character to do that. And then I do want to also say, and Arthur pointed this out as well, that good character education is good education. It increases academics too. So doing this is not an either or. And a democratic society demands virtue or character. And as Thomas Jefferson told us, no government can continue good but under the control of the people. It can't be good unless the people control it. And their minds must be informed by education, what is right and what wrong, to be encouraged in habits of virtue, to be deterred from those of vice. These are the inculcations necessary to render the people a sure basis for the structure and order of government. Our founding fathers knew that the virtue of the citizens is what will hold up our democracy. And as you look around our democracy now, it's not healthy. It's not doing well. We're in stasis, we're split, we're not dealing with our problems. There's all sorts of things that have been going on for decades. And a lot of that rests on the shoulders of us, we the people, the citizens. As Teddy Roosevelt once said, to educate a person in mind and not in morals is to educate a menace to society. If we make people smart but not good, that's dangerous. And Reverend Martin Luther King said intelligence plus character. That's the goal of true education. I only learned this week from my good friend Angela Duckworth in her weekly essay that he wrote this when he was 18 years old in a student newspaper at Morehouse College, which for those students out there who are watching, think about that one. Here's the 18-year-old Martin Luther King just out of high school. And he's saying something that's so true and so eternal that we're still saying it today. It's worth paying attention to. So that's part of my diatribe about why, the why. I want to spend a little more time now on the what. So what is character first and what is character education? One way to understand character more fully is to understand that there are at least 4 sort of buckets in which you can put character. The one I'm most concerned about is the moral, the doing good, being the good person. Okay, well, what we just heard in the last video, being a person of integrity. But there's also intellectual character. It's that part of you that helps you seek out knowledge, seek out truth. And knowledge and truth are really under attack around the world right now. We need that intellectual character to be able to discern that which is true. And then civic character is what I was just talking about, being a good citizen. What part of you helps you to be an effective and good citizen? And I will tell you that one of my concerns with democracy, and this is not a Republican or Democrat issue, this is democracy, is that democracy has devolved into a search for personal interest for too many people. Ethicists tell us that whatever theory of ethics you might believe, whether it's a secular one or a faith-based one or whatever one it is, it's always more than self-interest. It's always more than selfishness. It's always more than looking out for what I want for me and those close to me. And it's taking that civic perspective. It's tikkun olam. How do I make the world a better place? Make my community, my state, my nation, and the world a better place. And lastly, part of character is about performance. Because if you have moral, intellectual, and civic aspirations, you still need to know how to do it. And Arthur mentioned that when he talked about that quote about the corporate world. The corporate world says, hire for character and then teach the skills. Well, I'm going to add to that one, because another one that I've heard is that businesses all too often hire for skills and fire for character. If you don't have that character, they may not select you on that basis, but they'll deselect you on that basis. And then this is the definition from character.org. I'm sorry, Arthur, I haven't updated the slide. Shouldn't say Character Education Partnership, that's the old name. It's character.org. But it has these 3 pieces, the head, the heart, and the hands. So we need to know what goodness is, the head. We need to care about it deeply. It's got to matter to us. That's the heart. And then we have to have the skills to act on it. So the last part of the what is character education. Now I have to tell you, I'm thrilled that Texas is mandating it. That Texas has got it in the legislation. You just heard Steve talking about that, how it should be, how hard they work to get this bill through. right? Texas is not the first state to mandate it. Texas is not the first place to mandate it. And so many of the places who have mandated it didn't fund it, didn't mean it, and it withered on the vine. So let's not be complacent. Let's celebrate the fact that Texas is now one of the states that's mandating it. But if we stop there, it's probably for naught. And that what we have to do is discern what is effective practice. What makes it really work? How can we get this in as many places as possible? Because the bottom line is if we don't fundamentally change character, or what I, whoops, sorry, I went too far. Or what I call nurturing the flourishing of human goodness in the forthcoming book on Primed. If people don't really change for the better, it doesn't do anything. So how can we do that? This is the model that I am going to tell you about, and I'm going to buzz through this fast. I'm not used to speaking for only 15 minutes, so I will try my best to buzz through this fast. But the idea is that effective character education has a series of principles, what I'm calling design principles, that we need to adhere to. And I want to tell you that this is not something I made up or dreamt one night. For the last 20 years, we've been collecting all the research on character education and trying to figure out what does it tell us about effective practice. And we found all of these effective practices, and we put them into these 6 buckets, if you will, these 6 design principles. And we have places where you can drill down and find out what the actual practices are, but I don't have time to do that today. So I'm just going to tell you these design principles. The first one is prioritization, prioritizing character education. I've been doing this for about 40 years, and sometimes it's authentic and sometimes it's not. And sometimes the priority is a secondary or tertiary or lower priority, and it gets short shrift and it doesn't do a whole lot. So you got to ask yourself, for you as an educator, for you as a student, for you as a government official, for you as whatever your role happens to be, just how important is this? There's an intriguing study done by my friend Rick Weisbord at the Harvard Grad School of Education a little while ago, in which they asked students, parents, and teachers, which is more important to you to nurture in kids? Is it academic success? Is it personal happiness? Is it respectfulness? I think the other was, honesty or integrity, something like that. And what happened is the parents said, oh, for us, it's respect, and compassion or caring. That was the other one. We want our kids to be respectful and compassionate. And they asked the kids, what do you parents care most about? And they said academic achievement and my happiness. And the parents didn't even realize that they weren't really promoting what they thought was their first priority. And the kids saw what the parents really did emphasize. So sometimes we really have to look in that mirror deeply and say, is it authentically a priority? Is it at the heart of what this school is about, or this family, or this community, or this state? And the second one, the R, is for relationships. Educators tend to believe that because they come to education with golden hearts for children, and they do, that good relationships are going to flourish in the classroom, in the school. And they're right. They probably will, except for the people who need them most, except for the kids and the adults who need those relationships most and are not so good at eliciting them and making them happen. And unless we make relationships an intentional, strategic, and structural priority of our school, we make spaces, we make policies, we make practices to ensure that every member of that school, and that includes the principal and the cook and the oldest kids and the youngest kids and every teacher and everybody else, is part of a network of caring, healthy relationships, that a lot of people are going to get left behind. The I is for intrinsic motivation. And I want to stop for a moment and thank Zakaria Yuxel, and I probably butchered your name, and I'm sorry for that, who was the one who came to me and invited me to be part of this and who helped organize this. And it was a series of really intriguing interactions that we had that caught my interest. And it was his openness to thinking deeply and differently about this. And I was impressed by that. And a lot of it was around this notion of intrinsic motivation. I'm not going to go into the details of it, but I will tell you, and many of you are not going to like this, but that's okay with me. Giving rewards, having competitions, having these big rah-rah assemblies and so on, doesn't do much to change anybody's character. And if you really want to figure that one out, you can do a thought experiment on your own, because we don't have time to do it now, that I do all the time, which is to look into your own soul and say, what's one of my character strengths? Am I a particularly respectful person? Am I particularly caring? Am I particularly reliable? Do I have integrity? And then ask yourself the tougher question. Where did that come from? Why are you that kind of person? And I'll tell you, I've done this with thousands of people all around the world. And nobody's ever told me their character came from Abel's song or a poster contest or a reward somebody got in a school or a lesson a teacher taught me, poster on the wall, a quote somebody read me. Nobody's ever told me that's caused their character. We know what causes your character. And it's the role models that Arthur talked about when he talked about catching it. It's about you making it a self project that he talked about when he talked about seeking it. It's about belonging to a community that authentically commits to human goodness and care for others. Those are the things that change our character all the time. And that's what we have to rely on. Well, we have to get people to take those values inside themselves. We don't want students who only do this because there's a reward, and they do that all the time. We want students who this becomes who they are, and they walk that path the rest of their lives because they've internalized it and they deeply believe it. And that's a different strategy than all the rewards and recognitions that we've been relying on. The M is for modeling. We've already talked about that, but the obligation is every educator and every adult who is in a school has to exemplify what they want in kids. You cannot ask them to be something that you can't be or do yourself. It doesn't work, and we know that from research. And that's a heavy lift. That's asking an awful lot of educators. But teaching is not a job, and it's not just a profession. It's a calling to service, to the service to children. And when you're called to serve, it doesn't matter what you're paid, and it doesn't matter what kind of respect and recognition you get. And so being a paragon of virtue and a role model is not too much to ask when it's a calling. And then the E is for empowerment. We live in a democracy. I've already harped on the fact that it is not doing well right now. And we learned from John Dewey, and we've learned from Walter Parker, and we've learned from lots of other places that you don't develop civic character, which we talked about, just by learning about democracy. That's a good thing to do. You learn it from experiencing the power of your voice in the public sphere, searching for the common good. And I will tell you, it's my belief that the common good's an endangered species right now. We're losing that. And we need to reinvigorate our commitment to the common good. And we need to create classrooms and schools where kids' voices matter, where we listen to them, authentically listen to them. And lastly, we need to take a developmental perspective. When I worked at the United States Air Force Academy, and Arthur did too, their goals early on were listed as cadets who. Cadets of the name is what they call students at the Air Force Academy. Cadets who have this characteristic, cadets who have that virtue, and so on. And I said, that's good, but that's not your goal. Your goal is officers in the operational Air Force who have those characteristics, because that's when they're going to have the control of weapons of mass destruction. I want it now while they're students, of course, but I want the impact to be long-term. Well, the same thing in schools. What's most important is we're investing in who these people are going to be 10, 20, 30, and 40 years from now. And not just getting them to be a certain way or do a certain thing in the current moment. And that's a different pedagogy. It's a different skill set. So I just wanted to tell you that this model of primed was in the end of 2018, was featured in a report from the U.S. Department of Ed, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, Attorney General, and the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services to the President of the United States. And I think it cut across two administrations. I think it started in the Obama administration and finished up in the Trump administration. So this is not a partisan piece. And what they said was, if we really want to make schools healthy, safe places, we need to prevent violence, not just react to it. And to prevent violence, we need character education. They name that explicitly. That's what we need. At the end of that section, they listed 5 approaches that they say are evidence-based approaches. And primed was one of them, which I was stunned at because nobody knew about primed yet, but somehow they found it. So I urge you all, and I'm going to let you know how you can get directly in touch with me if you want to. Just be clear on who you are and what you're asking me, but you're welcome to get in touch with me if you have follow-up questions. I'm thrilled to see Texas dedicating a week. Week's not enough. It's forever. But it's a start. You went from a day to a week, and now let's make it an eternal project to nurture the flourishing of human goodness. Because the only thing that will make this a better world is better people. And if we want better people, we have to strategically, intentionally, and wisely invest in that which really does change the human spirit for the good. Thank you.